This is session 1 of the masterclass entitled How to Unleash Hypnotic Power Loops to Ensure You Get Amazing Results with Hypnosis. In this session, you'll discover how to reach the mastery level of hypnosis through using a little-known device that is a pattern that a lot of hypnotic masters have come into. And we're going to be focusing on these throughout this month's session because I think it's one of the most important elements, one of the most important tools that you as a hypnotist can have in your arsenal. Now, this is going to be, if you like, kind of a crucible to mastery. I'm going to give you not just the ideas and the concepts, but I'm also going to invite each of you to come on board and begin to train and actually to brainstorm, if you like, the language that we'll need to put into these hypnotic power loops so you get used to the process of doing this. Because once this masterclass is over, you'll have the tools you'll need to go away and do these for yourself. And we'll talk through step by step how you can create them, what kind of loops you need to be creating, and where and when you can use them. Now, where did I get this idea of hypnotic power loops from? Because this is something which is pretty much unique. No one outside of the context of these masterclass is talking about this. People are talking about similar things in a much more basic sort of way when they talk about things like you have to have a hypnotic pattern. This is in the old world of hypnosis. Hypnotists would often say you need to have a hypnotic pattern to be able to just hypnotize someone and run through your things. This is particularly known in the field of stage hypnosis where people virtually memorize an entire show which they then reel off afterwards. Now, those of you who know me well already know that I hate the idea of having to memorize things, having to read other people's scripts out or anything like that. So this is not what we're aiming for here. We're not aiming for memorization of something. But what we are aiming for is familiarization with certain waypoints and a certain way of speaking, a certain kind of language, hypnotic language, that allows you to, if you like, hit autopilot at any point. That means no matter where you are in an induction, at the beginning phase, at the deepening phase, at the transformation phase, or the awakening phase, you should be able to carry that part of the induction, that part of the hypnotic procedure, on complete autopilot, which frees your mind up to do certain things, like thinking, strategizing, observing, all these things that are part of your hypnotic repertoire, your hypnotic skills. Now, if you think about the secrets that have made anyone masterful in the past, in any kind of discipline, it's really that they've created a set of habits and refined those habits until they're so polished that they stand out from everyone else. So, we're talking now about the secrets behind anyone who has mastered any particular discipline, and it's his ability of creating certain habits and refining those habits to the point where you excel in your field. You may be familiar with the old quote, which is that genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. So what we're going to do today is we're going to look at that 1% of inspiration so that you can go away with all the tools you need to go to that 99% of perspiration stage, that stage where you work out your own dynamics, so that you get to the point where your hypnotic language and your understanding and your knowledge of where you place these things becomes something that other people look up to and really stands out. Now, let's have a look at what kind of habits are created in other fields. Musicians play scales ad infinitum. They'll play the scales to really become fluid with this. And scales is equivalent of creating hypnotic language. Now, the fact that you're listening to these masterclasses probably means that you have enough understanding of hypnosis that you already have those scales kind of sorted out. But they do other things as well. If any of you like things like, for instance, jazz or any kind of improvisational music, you'll know that there is a phrase called getting your chops down. And what that really means is, if you listen to improvisers, they're not actually improvising completely freehand. There's always going to be a certain riff, a certain sequence of things that they begin that other people can fall into, and then that gets repeated over time and maybe modulated and changed and added to, and then a new riff begins, and then a new riff begins. So these are, if you like, little set mini pieces that they put into an improvisational piece, and they can plug them all together, a bit like bricks on a Lego board, until they create a completely new piece of music. The same is true of other disciplines. Let's look at sports, maybe say boxing. In boxing, whilst a match is always going to be completely live in the sense that, you have to respond to the moment and all those sort of things, you'll notice that boxers have combinations. The classic is the old one too, the left-right. But they have combinations that they'll fire out, that they're so familiar with, that they can fire out from any position. And they've trained those over and over and over again. So again, you have this idea of loose-tight. You have a fixed set of things which are thrown into a complete chaotic environment, and that chaotic environment is given form through those few fixed things that are dotted in at the right place. Let's look at chess. Chess has the same thing. You have different plays, and whilst the chessboard has a virtually infinite variety of movements and positions that can be taken up, you'll know that chess masters have memorized thousands of different games in order to recognize little mini-games that happen inside. So as soon as someone moves one pawn or another knight or something like that, they know that this sequence will play out over the next 3 or 4 things, because if it doesn't play out in a particular way, they are weakening the position in other ways instead. So again, they have these little loops, these little patterns that they run, and they know what the consequences of those patterns are and when to use those patterns. In hypnosis, I like to call these patterns, these habits that you're going to refine, power loops. Why? Because they're little loops of hypnotic language that do specific things and are very powerful. This is where your hypnotic power, if you like, comes from. So let's start off by looking at some simple definitions that I'll be using today when we talk about power loops. The 4 labels I'm going to be using are, first of all, simple suggestions, process suggestions, mini loops, and power loops. Let me explain what I mean by those 4 terms. The first term, simple suggestion, is what we're really familiar with in terms of hypnosis. It's the idea of you're going into trance, and as you go into trance, this happens and that happens. You're going to do this, at the count of 3, you'll do that. Okay? So these are direct suggestions. There could be indirect suggestions as well, but they're very simple. There's no glamour, there's no bells and whistles around them. A process suggestion is basically a simple suggestion that has been compounded upon. In other words, it's become a little bit more polished. So a process suggestion will tend to create a simple process like you'll close your eyes and go into a trance. It's a very simple process that someone can follow along in order to act out on a suggestion. Now this is the level which is a little bit more sophisticated and which a lot of people pretty much are stuck at, particularly those who have learned the NLP Milton model of hypnosis. They tend to be stuck on this level of cause and effect, complex equivalence, whatever it is, simple uses of language which are very good and very valuable and haven't polished it to take the next level. The next level is what I call a mini loop. A mini loop takes several sets of process suggestions and puts them together into a mini loop. Now, the point of a mini loop is it achieves a certain thing. It's like a little stepping stone in a direction. If, for example, your aim is to induce hypnosis, by whatever means, there are certain stepping stones you'll want to hit along the way. Let's say you want to get eye closure, you may want to get changing breathing rate, you may want to get internal focus. Each of those 3 stepping stones, you may have a mini loop that you will run in order to get to that point. And once you get to the eye closure, you'll move on to the next mini loop, you move on to the next mini loop. So, mini loops themselves aren't the complete piece, but they are stepping stones that, when put together, create these power loops. So, a simple set of mini loops of eye closure, change of breathing, internal focus, might, when put together, be the power loop for a particular induction. And that's an induction that you can pull out of your hat anytime, any place, anywhere, because you're so familiar with it, with the context and the textures of it, that you can extend one of those mini loops to cover more. Say the eye closure happens later on, or you can shorten the mini loop, say the eye closure happens earlier on, until the mini loop fits the exact context you're in, and together each of those stepping stones invariably move to the outcome, which is what the power loop's all about. In this example, the induction of hypnosis. Now, I'd like to give you a short example of what I mean by this. So could I have a quick demonstration subject, so someone to come off the line as a volunteer?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Excellent, Sean. So, Sean, here's what you do, is just go into hypnosis.
Okay.
Okay, and to whatever extent you've done that, bring yourselves back. Now let me ask you this, how easy or straightforward was that for you?
Pretty impossible, really.
It's kind of like it's a direct suggestion, and if you said that to 100 people, go into hypnosis or go into trance, one of them will probably just fall over in trance, and 99 will look at you going, how? What are you talking about? Because they have too much conscious interference. So that's an example of a simple suggestion which can work, and if presented too barefaced, too nakedly, can have that sort of shocking impact of, well, I don't know how to do this. So let's try a process suggestion instead. So Sean, I'd like you to close your eyes and go into trance. Very good. And then bring yourself back, open your eyes, and feel refreshed. And when you've done that, let me know. How was that in comparison to the first simple suggestion?
It was more along the way than the first one.
It was easier to follow along, right?
Yeah.
Excellent. So what's happening there is, I'm giving you a bit of a process. And as soon as your mind has a process to attach to, closing your eyes is something you can do, something you know how to do already because you've done it throughout your life, volitionally and accidentally. So if you have a beginning of something, by doing that first part of the action, it makes it easier to let the process take care of the rest of the action. So that's the power of process instructions. It gives you something to attach onto, which you can do, which at the end of which, the actual suggestion can kind of piggyback off and become easier to do. I like to call these also piggyback suggestions. Now let's try a mini loop out, Sean. So Sean, what I want you to do is go ahead and fix your eyes on a certain point. Now as you look at that point over there, you'll notice that at some point your eyes will stop moving. You'll have a complete fixation of attention at that point. And as you fix your attention at that point, I want you at some point when you feel a sense of strain in your eyes, just close your eyes. and feel the relaxation that closing your eyes brings. Because as you're relaxing, you're beginning to go into trance. So the more you feel that relaxation with your eyes closed, the deeper into trance you go. And just allow yourself to drift through that experience before bringing yourself back with your eyes open for a fresh, relaxed alert. Simply fantastic. Ready to speak some more?
Yeah, that was a lot easier.
So what we've done there is we've gone through a progression from simple suggestions to process suggestions to what I would call a mini loop now. Now notice how the mini loop is nothing more than a set of process suggestions put back to back to make those stepping stones into a complete unit that you can follow along with, right? Now at the same time, a power loop just becomes the next logical progression. So go ahead and put yourself back on mute there, Sean. And I want you guys to realize that these loops that we're talking about is actually a very simple process. But at the same time, it's very powerful, as you just heard and hopefully experienced if you follow along with Sean's experience, how taking language and just refining it and adding bits onto it a little piece at a time, very simple steps as you go along, makes that language become more powerful and more hypnotic as you continue. And that's really what we're going to be focusing on today. Our job is going to be to create a stack of power loops that you can wheel out at any point in time, any place, any time, anywhere, in the hypnotic process, so that no matter what's going on, you are never stumped. You always have some direction to go in. And you'll know which of these power loops to use. We'll talk about what kind of power loops you want to generate to create so that you have those choices a little later on, probably in the next session. But for the moment, just bear in mind this is our outcome. The outcome is to have a set of power loops that no matter what situation you're in, be that the trance induction phase, the trance deepening phase, the transformation phase, or the trance exit or termination phase, that you always have something that you can pull out and run the person through, which will be successful because you have the language and the understanding and the timing and everything else down pat. Now, that sequence I've just talked about is very important. This is basically the fundamental structure of any hypnotic induction. Induce trance, deepen trance, transform, exit trance. And each of those phases, of course, will have their own set of power loops that you can create. You can create, say, a dozen different power loops for inducing trance. These are typically known as hypnotic inductions. Think about it. A hypnotic induction is actually a way of saying it's a power loop which induces trance. There is no magic in one induction over another. No induction is better than another. It's just a question of how well you refine the mini loops in each induction so that the person that you're working with can follow step by step along the process to go into trance. Now, chances are that if you've done any kind of hypnosis course, you've learned enough inductions, you have enough power loops for the induction process, that we don't need to focus on that anymore. If you want more, by the way, just have a look at my book, The Deep Trance Training Manual. You will find stacks of inductions, and they're actually laid out exactly in the way that we're going to learn power loops to be able to do that. The same goes for deepening trance. Typically, people have fewer ways to deepen trance, but still enough. You have, the staircase inductions, you have things like the early learning set, you have imaginations, you have direct suggestions, you have counting. There's all kinds of ways that people use to deepen trance, different kinds of procedures. Again, whatever procedure you use, be it counting, be it imagination like staircase or anything like that, be it a physical hypnotic phenomenon like hand levitation, whatever process you're using is again a set of power loops. It's a set of mini loops that stack up into one power loop, and you can have different power loops which deepen trance in different ways. Again, you're probably very familiar with that. The internet is littered with hundreds of suggestions for deepening trance. And again, in the book, The Deep Trance Training Manual, you'll find plenty of those there. So we're not going to focus on those as a topic, but those are important. If you don't have those yet, the principles we'll be discussing and training during the course of this masterclass will be as valid there as they are in the actual stuff that we'll be focusing on. The fourth stage, we're going to skip the third stage for a moment, which is the transformation stage. The fourth stage, exiting trance, is again something that you should be quite familiar with. You'll notice that usually when I take people out of trance, I have certain power loops that I use. One of my favorites is, you awaken, feeling a fresh, relaxed alert, simply fantastic. You will have heard that over and over again. In each of the inductions that I do, you will hear that phrase 90% of the time. Why? Because it's one of the standard phrases, one of the standard power loops that I use as part of my exiting hypnosis procedure. There are other things I use as well, which you'll hear me using at other times. But the point is, this is again something which is a very basic fundamental part of hypnotic process. The bit that gets me is, the bit that no one really goes into much depth over, is the transforming phase, which is really the most important bit. Because this is where you do what you have come here to do. You haven't learned hypnosis just to hypnotize someone. You've learned hypnosis to hypnotize someone in order to achieve a certain outcome. And that outcome is achieved in the transformation stage. Now, those of you who are interested in therapeutic hypnosis will have learned many techniques. And techniques are great things. They're powerful and useful and therapeutic and have a lot of value. there's only one problem with techniques per se. Techniques usually get developed to address a specific problem.